Welcome to another episode of BizStation. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on something that affects pretty much everything you buy, from the coffee you drink to the phone in your pocket. We're talking about international trade agreements, the complex web of rules that countries create to work together. It can seem pretty complicated, but don't worry, we're going to break it all down. So, just take a look at this car for a second. Have you ever really thought about where it came from? I mean, not just the final assembly plant, but all the little bits and pieces inside. The truth is, that engine block might be from Germany, the electronics from South Korea, the tires from Japan, and the steel from Brazil. Modern products are a truly global team effort. But for that team to work, you need a rulebook. You need cooperation. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll tackle the big why. What makes countries want to link their economies in the first place? Then we'll introduce a really handy analogy I like to call the integration ladder to see the different levels of teamwork. After that, we'll put our knowledge to the test with two massive real-world examples, the European Union and NAFTA. And finally, we'll wrap it all up by looking at what this all means for actual businesses trying to make their way in the world. Okay, first things first. Let's define the key term for today, economic integration. Now, that might sound a little academic, but when you boil it all down, the concept is actually pretty simple. It's just a formal agreement between a group of countries to reduce or totally get rid of barriers to trade with each other. It's about deciding, hey, let's make it easier to do business together for our mutual benefit. Now, this whole teaming up thing doesn't just happen one way. You can really think about it on three different scales. The simplest is bilateral. That's just a one-on-one deal between two countries. Then you can zoom out to regional cooperation. This is where a bunch of countries in the same neighborhood, like in Europe, get together. And then there's the big one, global cooperation, where you have massive organizations like the World Trade Organization trying to set the rules for basically the entire planet. To really get a handle on the different kinds of regional deals, I've got a great little analogy for you. I want you to picture a ladder. Each step you climb on this ladder represents a deeper, more involved, and more committed level of economic partnership between the countries in the group. And here it is, our integration ladder. You can see the progression, right? You start at the bottom with a free trade area. Then you can climb up to a customs union. And if you're really ambitious, you can go all the way up to a common market. The key thing to remember is that each step up includes everything from the step below it, plus a big new feature. So let's break down what each of these steps actually means. So let's start on that very first rung, the free trade area. This is the most basic entry-level kind of deal. The agreement is straightforward. All the countries inside the club agree to scrap tariffs on each other's products, so goods can flow freely within the area. But, and this is absolutely crucial, each country gets to decide for itself what tariffs to charge on goods coming from any country outside the club. Okay, ready to climb up a step? Next up, we've got the customs union. This takes everything the free trade area does, so still no tariffs between members, but it adds one huge new layer. All the member countries agree to have the exact same set of tariffs for the rest of the world. They act as a single, unified bloc when trading with outsiders. No more setting your own rules. And now for the highest step we're going to look at today, the common market. This is the whole shebang. It's got everything from the first two steps. No internal tariffs, a unified external tariff, and then it adds something revolutionary, the free movement of factors of production. Now that sounds a little jargony, right? All it really means is that not just goods, but people and money, labor and capital, can move across the borders inside the bloc almost as if it were one single country. Okay, so countries go through all this trouble to climb this ladder. But why? What's the payoff? Well, the source material points to three major upsides. First, you get what's called trade creation. By knocking down walls, you encourage more trade and make it more efficient. Second, companies can achieve incredible economies of scale. Instead of just producing for your home country, you can build a giant factory and serve the entire region. And third, all of this leads to increased competition, which in theory means better products and lower prices for you and me. All right, that's enough theory. Let's see how this ladder actually works in the real world. And for our first case study, we have to look at probably the most ambitious integration project on Earth, the European Union. The EU is such a fascinating case because it hasn't just climbed our ladder, it's practically added new rungs to the top. It is a full-blown common market, which is already a huge deal. But then a bunch of its members went even further. They took the massive step of giving up their own currencies to adopt a single one, the euro. This created a monetary union, which is one of the deepest forms of economic entanglement a group of countries can possibly have. Okay, so that's the EU model of deep, deep integration.
But that's not the only way to do it. For our next case study, let's hop across the pond and look at a very different kind of agreement that you've definitely heard of, the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA.
So here's the lowdown on NAFTA. You've got the three big North American players, Canada, the United States, and Mexico. This agreement kicked off way back on January 1st, 1994, and its main goal was to create a free trade area, our first step on the ladder, to make it easier for goods, services, and money to move between the three countries. What made it so interesting was that it linked two very wealthy, developed economies with a major developing one. So why did they do it? What was the logic? Well, honestly, it was incredibly practical. It wasn't about creating some grand new political union. It was about taking a reality that already existed and just making it more efficient. The U.S. was already, by far, the biggest trading partner for both Canada and Mexico. NAFTA was really about formalizing and streamlining those gigantic pre-existing economic relationships. Now, this slide is super interesting. It's just a number, right? 50%. But this number represents a really important and clever rule inside NAFTA called rules of regional content. The idea was to stop companies from, say, shipping cheap parts from Asia into Mexico, doing a tiny bit of assembly, and then shipping the final product to the US tariff-free. This rule said that for a product to get that sweet tariff-free deal, at least half of its cost had to originate from right there within North America. So what happened after it was all said and done? Well, according to the source material we're looking at, a couple of major things stood out. First, it reports that the deal led to a big increase in U.S. companies investing in Mexico, drawn by things like different labor costs and environmental rules. The source also points out that illegal immigration remained a major and very complex challenge for the countries involved in the agreement. Okay, we've covered the what, the why, and the how for countries. But let's bring all this back down to the ground level. If you're trying to run a business, what on earth does all of this mean for you? How do you actually operate in a world carved up into these massive economic blocks? Well, operating in a region like the EU or the old NAFTA forces companies to ask some really fundamental questions. For example, where should you actually build your factory? You need to find the most cost-effective spot within the bloc to take full advantage of those free trade rules. And what's your entry strategy? Do you just export your stuff there, find a local partner, or go all in and build your own operations? And maybe the trickiest one, how do you design a product for the whole bloc while still remembering that people in, say, Spain and Finland might want very different things? And this really brings us to the final big picture question. On one hand, these agreements are all about cooperation, about bringing countries closer together. But on the other hand, by creating these powerful insider groups, do they risk creating a more fractured world of us versus them? So as these powerful trade blocs continue to evolve, are they really building bridges toward a more cooperative global economy, or are they building walls between competing teams? It's something to think about. As powerful trade blocs evolve, are we moving toward a more cooperative world or a more divided one? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the BizStation. See you in the next video.